What's going on next, family? Pastor Preston back with you for our 5th week in our 6-week sermon series or devotional series called Villains. We're looking at common villains in the Bible and comparing what they did wrong, and hopefully for us, we're learning from their bad examples of what we should do differently. In week 1, we talked about how because of sin, we're all villains in somebody's story at one point in our life or not. The second week, we talked about anger and about how Cain's anger got the better of him, and he ended up making some big mistakes because of his anger. Then 2 weeks ago, we talked about King Saul, who let his pride get in the way and ultimately disobeying what God wants from him, ended up in him getting removed as king. And then last week, we talked about redemption, how even though Paul, the Apostle Paul, who was originally called Saul, killed people, killed Christians, but because of Jesus Christ intervening, was redeemed and used to do great mighty things. This week, we're going to talk about who many of you may know as Judas, who was one of the 12 disciples, and his betrayal of Jesus Christ. And so when you think about Judas and you think about him as a villain, man, he is one of the biggest villains in the Bible, right? He's the one who turned Jesus over to be dead and to be crucified and to be beaten. And when we think about this saying, it always strikes me as kind of weird. You've ever heard the saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer? And that was kind of the case with Judas, right? He was one of the 12 disciples who followed Jesus everywhere, who went with him to see him do miracles. It's not like Judas was kind of off in the distance. Judas was right by Jesus' side when he walked on water, when he fed the 5,000, when he healed people and brought people back to life. Judas had a front row seat to see Jesus do miraculous things, yet he was the one who turned Jesus in to be crucified and to be killed. So what makes Judas's betrayal so interesting is the fact that it wasn't something that just happened. It was something that had been planned out ahead of time. When we look, for example, at the Apostle Peter's life, he betrayed Jesus by denying him 3 times, but that was something Peter did in the moment. And then after he did it, he was regretful of it immediately. Judas betraying and turning in Jesus was something he had planned for years, up to 2 to 3 years. And that makes it not just a one-time act, but an everyday decision to plan on betraying Jesus. And that was so key and why his motives and his life is such a bad example. When we look at great movies like the movie Braveheart, I know one of the scenes that sticks out to me is at the end, when William Wallace and Robert Bruce kind of had a butting of heads at the end. One of the famous lines that I think is so impactful is he says, all men betray, all lose heart, right? It's kind of that saying that everybody at some point or another has betrayed someone, thought about betraying someone. Even think about your life. Who's some of the closest friends that maybe you had when you were younger who are no longer your friends because they said something mean about you, stabbed you in the back, did something that was just very mean, and you never forgave them and you never had that friendship the same way again, right? We've all been betrayed by somebody we cared about at some point in our life. And it's that whole quote of, man, everybody has got slip-ups, everyone has betrayed, but not everybody is like Judas, who has had a lifelong 3-year process of betraying and planning to turn someone in. When we first get a look at Judas, it comes in John, where there's this lady who is so in awe of Jesus. When Jesus comes into her house, she pours this expensive perfume that when the Bible says it's expensive, it was like perfume that was like a year's salary. So if you made $40,000 a year, it would be $40,000 perfume. She took the whole bottle, dumped it on her hair, and started using her hair to wipe Jesus's feet. And Judas looks at her and he says, that was a waste of money, dude. You had this expensive perfume that could have been sold and you could have used the money to serve the poor and to help the homeless. But Judas wasn't saying that because he really meant that. He was saying that because he was greedy. He truly wishes he could have got his hands on that perfume, on that money, so he could use it for whatever he wanted. And Judas was just this terrible guy that always was greedy, always looking to serve himself and not looking to serve others like Jesus did. So when Judas plans to betray and turn in Jesus for 30 shekels of silver, which is nothing, it's very, very cheap even in that day, he turned him in for almost no money. That just shows the greed that Judas had and the hatred he had for Jesus in his heart, that he was willing to turn him in for almost no money, almost no prize at all. And so when we look at Judas, we understand that that was a premeditated attack. It was a premeditated betrayal. Now, the Bible never tells us why the real motive Judas turned him in was or betrayed Jesus. It may have been he didn't agree with his teachings. It may have been he was angry that he wasn't number one in the 12 disciples. It may have been that he didn't like that Jesus was reaching the unwanted people. We never know. But what we do know is that his betrayal was big, and it was huge, and it was so close to home for Jesus because he was one of Jesus's 12 disciples that he handpicked to come walk with him, to love, to teach them, to show them what it meant to really live out their faith. Judas shows us a prominent example that even those who are close to Jesus end up having moments of betraying him. Judas had walked with him, been by his side for 3 straight years, and yet he decided to turn Jesus in and betray him. Even those of us who are close to Jesus can still betray him. And it shows us a great example. Just because you're close to Jesus doesn't mean you're always holy. Just because you come to church every Sunday doesn't mean you're living your faith out. Just because you come to next nights doesn't mean you truly care about Jesus, right? Proximity and closeness to Jesus doesn't mean being like Jesus. And so we love when we watch villains and stories and movies and shows that get what they deserve, right? Where the end comes and they get justice, they get what they deserve. But, that's what we see in the life of Judas. What did Judas do after Jesus was beaten and he turned him in? Well, Judas immediately felt bad and he gave the money back to the people. And he said, I don't want your money anymore. But instead of going to Jesus and saying, Jesus, forgive me, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have turned you in, what did he do? He was so shameful that he ran and hung himself and killed himself because he was so distraught with sorrow and with shame of what he had did. And so when we look at Judas's life, it's a sad ending to what could have been an amazing life. You think about all the 11 of the rest of the disciples. They went on to do great things, to do amazing things that only God could do, and these amazing miracles after Jesus died, but not Judas. Judas, because of his hard heart, because of his greed, because of his betrayal, went and committed suicide. And it's such a sad story for someone who had so much potential. Now, I want us to take it to us today as we close. When it comes to you, have you been getting cold with Jesus lately? If you're honest with yourself, have you felt close to Jesus in the last month? Have you felt close to Jesus in the last week? What about the last 2-3 months? What about the last 6 months? What about in the last year? Have you felt close to Jesus? Have you had peace? Have you had joy? Have you had that sense of belonging? What would it be for you? Just because we're close to Jesus doesn't mean that we're like Jesus. And so I encourage you, man, to take some time to reflect and to think, have you been running away from Jesus? Because just like we saw with the Apostle Paul last week, just because we're going away from Jesus doesn't mean we can't stop today, turn around and have Jesus bring us back and have us be closer to him, to experience joy, to experience peace, to experience love, and those things that we're so desperately wanting and needing in our lives, Jesus is offering to you and to me today. Turn around and come back into his arms. He has nothing but love for you today. Next, students, I love you. I can't wait to see you in a week. Next, not this Sunday, but the Sunday after, August 30th, we are having a back-to-school cookout here at FPC. It's just going to be a chill night. We're not really doing anything. We're going to have a bunch of games outside. We're going to cook out. We're going to have a fun time just as a de-stressor as you really get started going back to school. And then in September, what we're doing is we're going to Adventure Park, September 19th on a Saturday. Adventure Park's in Virginia Beach. If you don't know what that is, visit www.myadventurepark.com to see what it's all about. It's an In the Trees ropes course, and we're going for their glow-in-the-dark night. So we're going to get there. It's going to be kind of sunsetting, and then we'll get to play and go in the trees at night too. So if you're interested in that, make sure to fill out the Google form, make sure to pay your $20, and make sure that you fill out the liability form. You cannot go if you don't pay your money and you don't fill out the liability form. If you have any questions or don't know where to find that stuff, message me on Instagram, follow our Facebook and our Instagram pages. You can DM us or Facebook message us there, and we'll send all that information to you. I can't wait to see you in just a week. Next, students, I love you, and I can't wait to do some amazing things with you coming up soon.